Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for zooming in for this. I want to let you know I'm going to be doing 3 short excerpts today. And the first one is from an essay called A Slow Goodbye. And it's from this anthology, New Beginnings. And this was actually edited and published by a student of mine. He has his own book imprint called Timbercrest Publishing. And this particular anthology has incredibly diverse voices. There's at least a couple dozen people in here. A number of them are students, a lot of different countries represented. I really recommend it to anybody who hasn't read it. So this is the initial part of this essay I'll be reading right now. So, in a wholesome flower print dress, cheery TV chef Laura Calder is smiling through lipstick while making a Genoise sponge cake. She breaks 4 eggs into a metal bowl and adds vanilla. Because you don't want to lose any volume, add the flour very gently, she recommends. Baking or cooking tips on television hold no allure for me at all, sort of like monster truck rallies or golf tournaments. But since my hubby Frank, our former household chef, loves them, we're watching French food at home in bed. He wears a green wool ski toque pulled over his wan bearded face, which reveals little emotion. With the covers yanked right up under his chin, he looks dwarfed by fabric, like a lost little kid. I've fired up the wood stove, even though it's sunny and 32 degrees Celsius outside. Frank is always cold now. Months ago, I put away the beautiful beach scene. Didn't want them ruined from the blood, shit, and pee stains I kept trying to wash out. Now we're snuggling under an old brown duvet cover I made decades ago. Safety pins hold one end together because the rectangular strips of Velcro along the edge have mostly worn or torn off. Frank is dying. 5 months ago in March, he was diagnosed with liver disease, colon cancer, and type 2 diabetes. Only 10 to 20% of his liver is functioning. The doctor said he had a 50-50 chance of living for a year. Frank recently turned 64, like in the Beatles song. He rotates between our bed, the commode, and the couch. It's hard to watch him struggle as he lifts himself up from the bed and stands briefly, teetering on now too skinny legs. He can use a walker only for short spurts, not wanting me to help him. I understand. We're both stubborn, favoring self-reliance. See how nice and doughy that is? Calder pours her whitish mix into a metal pan. I envy Calder's cooking glee. For me, food prep is something to avoid or finish as fast as possible. Eating wise, give me something cold, raw, out of a can, I don't care. With high metabolism, I'll eat almost anything when I'm hungry enough. But Frank's condition has forced me into the kitchen. Now I'm responsible for giving him 3 healthy meals a day. Not easy for someone who associates cooking with rejection, a childhood thing. He is often irritable and impatient. Personality change is part of his liver condition. He wants his meals and drinks prepared and served in specific ways. Lemon slices in his pop and radlers. No microwaving, my favorite technique. Only certain bowls will do. One time he demanded a straight-edged knife to cut an apple, grimacing at the one with a serrated edge that I provided. Unacceptable, he grumbled. Before Frank's illness, I rarely cared about any of his favorite TV cooking shows. Now, almost daily, we listen to his food hero, Alton Brown, or see edgy chef Guy Fieri swagger in his outdoor kitchen, We watch every manner of chef, tattooed or crazy coiffed, try to outcompete each other in high stress, high heat scenarios. We watch greasy carnival food prep and barbecues done on grossly huge, crude, homemade steel racks on man-fire food. I've conjured heart attacks eyeing foot-high hamburgers with bacon and dripping beef juice on diners, drive-ins, and dives. Although all meat except fish and seafood repulses me, I've started eating it because preparing separate meals for both of us takes too much time and effort. Ever since the hospital dietitian told Frank that his liver was craving meat, he has become a righteous carnivore. Our fridge is now crammed with alien flesh, pork tenderloin, ribs, chicken thighs, liver pate. Yuck. The cake will be too dry, says Calder, if it doesn't have something to drink up. So I'm going to melt some red currant jelly and spread it on top for a nice glaze. Zen Buddhist master Thich Nhat Hanh likens death to a cloud, a temporary shape. The cloud transforms but never disappears. Instead, it continues as rain or mist. To him, life is a process of no birth, no death, no coming, no going. But Frank is no wispy white fluff in the sky. I struggle to find daily appreciation, allowing the familiarity of his gestures and loving pet names for me to seep in with deeper resonance. A small sign which stood for years on the altar in my meditation hut reads, "I am grateful for everything in my life." Lately, my bones don't believe it. We have fewer cozy mornings now in our queen-size bed, but still watch Trump's ridiculous lies and indictment developments on TV. When I hit Frank's leg or foot by mistake in bed, he winces, ever stoic. His emaciated, bruised arms look so fragile. I know he's often in more pain than he's telling me. His abdomen, swollen with ascites or fluid buildup, is off limits because any touch there hurts too much. Frank and I recently drove around our local Seaview Cemetery to see if that's where he wants to be. I won't mind the traffic noise, he quipped. He's already written the words and chosen the images he wants for his cremation plaque. He ordered a memorial bench that now overlooks the ocean from a popular nearby pier. It bears a tiny rectangular plaque with only his name and the simple phrase, "Navigating the Cosmos." No dates, no numbers. In the living room, I stare at the messy sprawl of tools Frank left around the house, remnants of the repair jobs he was about to start before he became bedridden. Paint scrapers, sandpaper, and small jars of stain and primer sit untouched on the windowsill. Long strips of wood trim lean against the wall by the wood stove. Bags of screws. I have not had the heart to move any of them. If they're still here, he will be too. Besides, it would seem disloyal to bring in a stranger to do this finicky fix-it stuff, especially with Frank swallowed under blankets on the sofa, only meters away. He says it kills him that he can no longer do all the tasks he once did. You have no idea how hard it is, he says. It would take 4 people to replace you, I tell him. Since Frank's diagnosis, I guard my strength by reducing human connections to basic terms. Does someone give energy or take it away? My sister warned me that people would call, comment, advise, and seek information primarily for their own sake, not mine. She was right. This has been hard to accept, especially in close friends, with fear, death, and the unknown the best they can. Many people want specifics. Is Frank getting better? How long has he got? Is he okay? We're taking it a day at a time, I tell them. They offer unsolicited advice and stories of others who use stem cells or insert miraculous solution to cure themselves. They know nothing about the workings of a liver, but sound off like experts on cancer. Make sure his diet is alkaline, not acidic. Have him listen to music every day. Try this, try that. I know they want to help. Some offer unwanted comments like, I thought he looked a lot worse than he did before. And you must go through hell. Every morning when you wake up, you realize that you live in a nightmare and there is really no end in sight. No wonder you are exhausted all the time. Okay, so I'm going to end it there. What I do in the essay next is go to Easter Island. That's somewhere I've always wanted to go. And I talk about it as a kind of a metaphor for what's happening on the planet and the sense of loss they're going through because of climate change. And so I alternate back and forth between that reality and then the one that I'm dealing with. So that's, again, the essay from New Beginnings. So thank you for listening to that. And thank you. And my next selection is from a chapter of my memoir, which, as Lara said, will be published in 2023. And this is a chapter called Shamed. I stood under the white marble dome inside the Taj Mahal's main antechamber. These white 17th century walls, inset with flower-shaped semi-precious stones and carved with bas-relief roses and irises, spoke of Mughal glory and Muslim rulers long gone. It was the afternoon of a full moon night in early September 1990. I was with Mukesh 3 months after we had first met. I had told him about Michael and let him read my journal. Amazingly, he had accepted this temporary liaison with another man as part of my emotional process. Mukesh chanted a low, strong tone of Om. Reverberating inside me, the deep vibratory note filled the air above us. Its soaring sound brought me tranquil joy, as if a petal aloft in the sky was drifting down towards me on a soft pocket of air. The building felt laden with lost voices and distant whispers, ready to be heard and released if only one would listen. We stood next to the white marble tomb of Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan and his favorite wife, Mumtaz Mahal, who died in childbirth after bearing 14 children. I'm surprised she lasted that long, I thought. Indeed, this exquisite Taj Mahal, called a monument to eternal love by one poet, stands in honor of Mahal. Her grieving widower commissioned it in 1632 as her mausoleum. Mukesh and I walk in slow circles on the marble floor, a sweep of whiteness and shadow. It felt cool to my bare feet. As clumps of tourists surrounded us, their presence felt like hazy wisps that could disappear with a swish of a hand. A male employee, short and fragile looking, stood by the tomb, surrounded by rows of tiny candles. He held out a delicate white lily blossom for me as a silent gift, prompting a minimal donation. Again and again, I inhaled the flower's subtle lemony scent, opening to its sensory caress. Then a crowd of raucous tourists entered. The room's mystique disappeared. It became a mere claustrophobic hall packed with sightseers. With my lily blossom in hand, I escaped with Mukesh onto the back terrace that overlooks the Yamuna River, swallowed into a glorious near sunset of deepening red-orange. We splashed barefoot through puddles from afternoon rain that filled the large array of square tiles in alternating black and white. We laughed and chased each other, king and queen on a giant chessboard in a game with no rules, stepping into wetness, admiring reflections, walking on clouds and patches of sky. We lay down on the vast checkered floor and lost ourselves in quiet, in whispers and laughter, in the unending stretch of sky, in the emerald green parrots with turquoise tail feathers that swooped and dipped above us. Shadows stretched and splayed around us as pink clouds deepened into red, swelling against the sky's saturated blueness. Reds reflected in the river, drifting into patterns of orange within minutes. The now wilted blossom in my hand still smelled fresh. We were experiencing this bliss far removed from Mukesh's family, or so I thought. While in Agra, we met briefly with his aunt and some female cousins, who welcomed me warmly in English. But neither of his parents had met me. His mother, a traditional Hindu, was horrified that he was traveling unchaperoned with an older white woman. She sobbed when he told her about me. He was bringing shame to the family. I discovered that his father had called Mukesh's aunt and asked her to track us down in Agra. His dad feared that I was an international heroin smuggler, intent on kidnapping his son and luring him to the West, ready to turn him into a junkie. He based this opinion on a British television program he had seen. I could only laugh and shake my head when Mukesh told me this. I felt like biblical Eve, unjustifiably maligned. Slated for an arranged marriage, Mukesh wanted to leave his native country and flee his parents' influence, and yet he said, "This is India, honey. In my culture, it is a disgrace to go against your father's wishes. I cannot disobey him. I owe my parents so much." We had talked about marrying once we were in Canada together. I wondered repeatedly how my life would unfold if I stayed in his country, married to an Indian man and living with him and his parents, forever the outsider. After our visit to the Taj Mahal, Mukesh's male cousin located us in our hotel and talked hurriedly to Mukesh in Hindi. Mukesh said he had to return to Delhi right away. He gave no explanation other than his family needed him. Dejected, I left to go back to the city by train on my own, on what was meant to be our romantic evening together. Earlier, when Mukesh and I had tried to get an auto rickshaw ride from the Agra train station to the Taj Mahal, the driver had shaken his head no with a figure-8 gesture of nodding, familiar trait across India. He and Mukesh exchanged a barrage of words in Hindi, and the driver waved his elbows at us like dried wishbones ready to snap. "What's he saying?" I prodded. Other auto rickshaw drivers, hungry for a fare, had paced around us. With clicks of their tongue, they gave me lurid looks as I glared back. Mukesh didn't want to answer, but I insisted. He told me I wouldn't fuck her, and then he said he couldn't give us a ride because he'd get in trouble. He's not allowed to give rides to prostitutes. I had stared dumbfounded at Mukesh, then at the driver. Shocked yet not wholly surprised, I felt tainted like a stinky fish carcass rotting in the sun. Nevertheless, my visit to the Taj Mahal felt like an indirect path to my dad's heart. When telling me of his first sight of this magnificent structure, he had softened his voice to a church-like whisper. Without articulating how or why, it had clearly moved him. He kept a miniature replica of it in his den. Now I shared the same reverence. When first seeing the Taj, I felt my eyes get wet and wanted to cry, but didn't know why. Okay, so I'm going to end that there. And then for my final excerpt, I'm turning to something lighter. This is from my picture book, Six Stinky Feet and a Sasquatch. And the illustrator is actually Lillian Lay, L-A-I. She's an animation director in Vancouver. She's actually worked on some Hollywood films, and she also illustrated my previous picture book for a different publisher. She does great work. And one of the rare privileges I had with both kids' books was, as an author, I got to have, even though this is a traditional publishers, I got to have input all the way along on what drawings were used, the color combinations, everything. It was wonderful because some authors don't even see the cover or anything until the book is out. So I felt very lucky about that. So anyway, I'll just read the first few pages. Annie loved to run barefoot through the rainforest. Her mother, however, most certainly did not. She didn't like the danger, she didn't like the mess, and she definitely did not like the smell. One day, Annie stopped to look at two enormous footprints in the woods, but her feet slipped under a cedar log. She fell up to her knees into yucky muck. Annie yanked and pulled, but could not free her feet. She pushed and shoved, but the log wouldn't budge. "Help," she cried. And then here's a picture of her stuck under the log, and the illustrator has put footprints across the page too. So. Something tall and brown leaned over her. It looked like a mossy tree, but it had long hairy arms and giant furry feet. "Get me out of here," yelled Annie. Two muddy hands, even bigger than her grandpa's, tugged at Annie's waist. They twisted her out of the guck and placed her gently on an old fir log. "Thanks," said Annie, trembling as she looked up. "Who are you?" It was too big for a bear, and trees don't grow fur. "Are you a Sasquatch?" Annie's grandpa had told her about this special being who appeared and disappeared in the woods like a spirit. The massive animal sat down, stretched out its legs, and wiggled its toes in Annie's face, as if waiting to get tickled. She caught a whiff of its whopping feet. They reeked like skunk cabbage. P.U. Okay, I'm going to stop there. There's a picture of Annie with the Sasquatch. And you'll have to wait if you want to find out what happens if you've got any kids or grandkids. And at the end of the story, I actually include some sort of nonfiction trivia and some sociocultural stuff and about the Sasquatch in different cultures and what some people believe about, and some of the hoaxes and things like that too. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. And I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Catherine McNeil, who's here, Cat Matt, because she was supposed to be slated to read today, but she couldn't, so she asked me to fill in for her. So thank you very much for that opportunity.